Hello everyone, this is part 8 of What If Naruto Had the Ninetails and the Shinigami sealed inside him, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. It has been 13 years since Minato had been banished from the Soul Society. Kushina had joined him a few months after he was banned. They eventually got married as Minato was appointed Hokage by the people of Konoha. Thanks to his sensei Jiraiya, he had also trained others in a different way other than Shinigami practicing. Minato had realized that other than Ryatsu he carried chakra in his blood, so he had more energy than Shinigami, and that was one of the reasons his stamina was so high in fights. Minato had also found the former second squad captain Yoroiki in her cat form. He knew her for a month before she left. Minato told Yoroiki of the story and she had nothing to say on the subject, but she looked after him a bit. Minato was living almost a better life than in the Soul Society. Peace was at this village and that's all Minato wanted. A world with no fighting or conflicts and everyone got along. Late in the 13th year of Minato's stay here, Orochimaru came. He had done Konoha well and earned the title of Sannin. Minato and Orochimaru stood side by side at the Hokage mountain watching the sunset like they do every day. It seems you found a better life, Minato. Orochimaru said. He had the Junin uniform on and his Zanpakuto across his back. Yeah, it seems like it. I can now run a village the way it should be, Minato said. He then looked over at Orochimaru as the Sannin pulled out a sheathed sword. I found your Zanpakuto, Minato. I was going to give it to you earlier but I forgot. You may need it, Orochimaru said. Minato paused as the scabbard shined his reflection. He slowly took it and held it in his hand. Thanks, didn't think anyone would find it. He looked at the sunset once more then turned away. I'm gonna go to bed. It's been a long day, what with paperwork and all. Minato then walked off a bit, then flash stepped in mid-air above the Hokage's mansion and then landed on the roof and slid down to a door. Orochimaru simply walked off, looking around a bit, thinking back. Although it might be peaceful in the real world, in the Quincy world hell broke loose with the disappearance of Kushina. She was the daughter of a wealthy clan chief in the Quincy, one of the most powerful Quincy's in that clan. They had attempted to track down her spiritual energy but to no avail. A clan war has started over the disappearance of her. With the Quincy population already in poor state, a civil war wouldn't do them any good. The only one who found out where Kushina was banished from the area a while ago. In the desert a cloaked man stood as the wind blew and the night grew. The man took out a lace that had a locket in it. He flipped it open to reveal a man, a woman and two children, one a female and one a male. It appeared to be the man's family. He closed the locket and looked at the horizon. Minato Namikaze, you took my sister and now you shall pay, the man said and opened a rift in the area and stepped through it. Another day had passed as Minato was stuck in his office doing paperwork. Kushina got rid of her Quincy clothes and grew out her hair. She wore a plain green shirt with a tighten apron-like thing around her end. She brought Minato some food and tea. Minato thanked her but was a bit busy on his paperwork to do much at the moment. The only reason Kushina wore such clothes is because she was pregnant with their child. She looked out the window, watching the sun shine brightly, looking over the Leaf Village sky. So peaceful, but I do think the Leaf Village ninjas should stay out of other villages. Do we not trust them? Kushina asked, looking over at her husband. They're Rutanbu, led by a whole different branch in this weird political stuff. In other words, I hardly have any control over them. If they get us into trouble they will be frowned upon and I'll have to take it into my own hands, Minato said as he continued doing his paperwork. Geez, now I know how a Gote 13 captain feels, Minato said and softly chuckled to himself. Just then a pressure slammed onto Minato as his eyes widened and he dropped his pen, having it roll to the ground. He looked over at the window and saw that Kushina felt it too. A figure was over a cloud of smoke at the city. A portal had just closed. Minato figured the man got from it, but seeing that the explosion happened so fast and that it must have came from the bottom up and he was standing still basically motionless. Orochimaru came into Minato's office with a really surprised look. Minato, did you? Orochimaru shouted out. Yeah, I just saw that. Who do you think is that guy? Minato asked, looking over at Orochimaru. He then felt the presence grow stronger as the glass then shattered. Kushina crossed her arms and drifted back lightly. Orochimaru grabbed her and shielded her from the glass. Why don't you ask me yourself, Minato Namikaze? The cloaked man said as Minato unsheathed his Zanpakuto and slashed at him. The man stepped back and floated in front of the Hokage's office. Arashi, Kushina muttered out in shock. You know this guy? Minato asked, looking back at Kushina. Why wouldn't she? After all, she is my sister. Arashi said as his tattered Titan cloak blew in the wind. He had spiky red hair and the top of his cloak covered his mouth. He had dark brown eyes and wore long black gloves. His clothes under the cloak are sort of like Kabuto's, only black and tan. An orange sword was shown attached to his belt, an orange sword with that blue diamond design katanas have. Bull S. How can you be Kushina's brother if you have a Zanpakuto, and a spiritual pressure of a Shinigami's? Orochimaru said, stepped aside after the glass was all on the floor. Sister, care to explain? Arashi said and grinned. Kushina sighed, looking down. After a while she looked up and directed her attention to Orochimaru and Minato, then said, well, when Arashi was a child my father tried to train him in the ways of a Quincy. He did decent and his spiritual arrows became strong, but they found out that he had a Ryatsu of a Shinigami's and his own Zanpakuto by the age of 14. My own father banished him from the Quincy village. He tried to go to the Soul Society but they didn't let him, thinking he was just a spy pretending to be a Soul Reaper. Since the Quincy deal was important back then, he then decided to become a nomad and roam the world by himself. No way, a Shinigami and a Quincy, that's not possible. Minato said, looking over at Arashi. Though it would seem, I embraced my Shinigami side and forced myself to learn how to make spiritual arrows without the bow. It worked, but they're really weak. But I shouldn't talk about my powers in front of an enemy. You took my sister and from what I've heard you two are married. I go by Quincy law and it is treason for a Quincy to marry an Shinigami. Arashi shouted, then made a spiritual arrow out of mid-air aiming at Kushina. Once Arashi fired the arrow, it was already deflected by Minato, who flash-stepped in the way. The arrow blew past Arashi and shot up into the sky. The two looked at each other with a harsh look. The area was quiet and Minato signaled Orochimaru to take Kushina away so she doesn't get hurt. Orochimaru nodded and gently grabbed Kushina's wrist and led her to a safe zone in the Hokage mountain. Arashi attempted to flash-step towards them but he was stopped by Minato. The two clashed blades as the steel began to glow red from the intensity of their Ryatsu as it started to grow. Minato pushed Arashi back out of the mansion as the nomad drifted back into the sky and rested his sword on his shoulder. Minato growled as he flash-stepped in front of him as he attempted to slash at him, but it was immediately deflected with his sword blocking the slash, then spin kicking Minato back. Arashi immediately dashed towards Minato and began to slash at him violently, having sparks fly from his sword. Minato flash-stepped behind Arashi and attempted to S him in the back, but Arashi dodged, pointing his sword downwards. It won't be that easy, King Me, Arashi said as they both spun around and clashed blades with each other. Arashi swiped his fingers across his blade as a red Ryatsu wave shot out with the same shape as his blade. It made Minato fly back and crash into the ground. The villagers started to scream and run off from the sight of their leader crashing. Arashi landed on the ground and walked over to the crater. Once the smoke was cleared, there was no body lying in it. Minato was behind Arashi with a hand placed on the man's back. A blast of his own Ryatsu shot out at Arashi, making him stumble and cough up some blood. Minato jumped up and kicked him a few times, landed, then punched him hard in the temple and kneeing him in the rib. His Ryatsu then swarmed in his right hand as he punched Arashi in the stomach as hard as he could, making him fly back. It was quiet for the moment as the dust cloud grew bigger, engulfing part of the village. Minato walked in the cloud and started to slowly walk, keeping an eye on for any strange Ryatsu movements. He then sensed his presence and attempted to clash blades with him, but to his surprise he was facing the wrong side. Arashi was crouched to the left of him as he espered him in the ribs. Minato widened his eyes and grabbed Arashi's Zanpakuto while getting in a deep stance, trying to get the sword out. He went into the direction I swung my sword. I know he did, but how did he get to the other side so quickly? How? Minato said to himself as his hand began to bleed. Minato raised his sword and attempted to S Arashi in the eye. The man stepped back, getting SCRD vertically down the chest. Minato wasted no time as he SD at Arashi's feet only to uppercut him in the air and spin kick him forwards. Minato flash stepped and espered his sword straight through him, or so it seemed. Minato then felt a presence behind him as his back was slashed badly and he knelt down. Minato realized that the figure he espered was an after-image left behind by Arashi's speed. He looked behind him and saw Arashi hiding his loss of breath either from running so fast that his after-image stayed for over a minute or from the attacks that was dished out towards him. Either way, Arashi sheathed his sword, then grinned and stepped back. This isn't the last time you'll see me, Minato. I intend to KO you for the dishonor you have put upon my sister. But not today, it doesn't seem fitting to KO you now. Arashi said, then disappeared. Minato. A voice called out as Orochimaru ran over to his fallen comrade. Orochimaru helped the Hokage up as he brushed off the dust on his cloak, which had been ruined by the slash. Orochimaru saw him in shock as he looked at him. He's too powerful, he could have killed me at any time. The only reason I was alive is because it wasn't fitting. Damn it, damn it. Minato growled and panted at the same time. This Hokage duty made me ignore my training. There's no way I can keep up with him if he comes back and fights me again. Then again, I never did use my Shikai. I might have a chance, but I'll have to train lightly to get back into what I used to be 13 years ago. Minato said, basically talking to himself as he and Orochimaru walked off to join Kushina, who quickly healed her husband. Arashi appeared in a dark room with candlesticks vaguely lighting the area. He was in a meditation stance with his sword directly in front of him. He was contacting his Zanpakuto spirit, the legendary nine-tailed fox. It was the only sword of its kind with a spirit as powerful as the fox. Listen, QB, I have a plan. In 1 month I shall return to Konoha and release you from your sword. You must act as a diversion so all Konoha soldiers focus on trying to KO you. I will deal with the petty Hokage and KO him for what he has done to my family. Arashi said, being face to face with the QB. If you release me, your sword will reduce to a regular katana. QB said. Then I shall release a fourth of your power, enough for you to solidify and go into your form. I shall still have enough Ryatsu in the blade to finish him off. I could always power my own natural power into the blade in case I do not. Arashi replied, thinking this out perfectly. You have thought this out, I see. I shall rest until I am summoned once more. Try not to do anything stupid, Arashi. The QB said as it fell into that of a slumber. For 2 months Arashi had not come back to Konoha. Minato was as stressed as ever with training, and running a village. Orochimaru helped him with the paperwork and Jiraiya helped him spar. Minato could hardly sleep last night, thinking each day could be his last when Arashi came back. Then a few days later, at midnight where it was all calm, a huge wave shook the ground as a menacing roar overcame the village. What was that? Minato said, springing up from bed and immediately putting his Junin uniform on and his Hokage cloak. He looked out the window to see a huge fox with 9 tails slowly coming towards the village. Minato summoned Orochimaru and told him to go to the hospital where Kushina was with their child. Naruto. He told him to protect her as he went off to fend off the beast. All the Junin, Chunin, and Anbu were alerted and a flood of ninja dashed to the outward gate. Minato saw the fox up close and it had the essence of pure evil. He then felt a stronger presence on top of the fox and there was a figure standing on its head. The figure had a sword, which reflected the moon's light. Minato guessed it was Arashi, but he didn't want to try and get on the fox, so he stood on wall of Konoha waiting for him. The fox was only a few miles away from Konoha. After a few minutes of waiting, Arashi flash stepped beside him. The two turned to look at each other and drifted backwards. Minato unsheathed his sword, then looked at the man. He had changed greatly. The right side of his face had small bulging stays of this white substance. The substance was the same substance hollows have. His hair was jet black now and he had yellow eyes. He wore a long black cloak with red clouds on it and a red trim. Arashi, what happened to you? Your face? Minato asked. It's simple really. When I last saw you I was bluffing about the reason for not killing you then. You had an intense amount of Ryatsu and a lot of skill that hardly any Shinigami have. I had to get stronger any way I could, and that's where I found Aizen. He told me he could make me stronger and he did. By killing me I turned into a hollow and was so powerful that when he sped my mask off I didn't but I became what you call an Arrancar. Arashi explained, grinning. Part Shinigami, part hollow, all this just to kill me. I'm flattered, Minato said, grinning as he got in a deep stance, holding his sword with one hand and keeping it back. Arashi and Minato ran towards each other and clashed blades. The force of their blades touching made the wall crumble a bit. Arashi put some pressure on it and already Minato was ready to fall to his knees. Minato put another hand on his sword and slowly began to push Arashi back, but Arashi simply put more pressure into it and swatted Minato away, crashing into the right side of the crumble wall. Minato jumped up and attempted to slash at Arashi. He was successful, but there was no wound, cut, or blood for that matter. Arashi grinned as he thrusted his palm upwards and made Minato fly into the sky. Arashi flash stepped in front of Minato and punched him in the gut, then elbowed him in the face. Arashi sheathed his sword and clotheslined him down to the ground. The clothesline failed as Minato clashed his sword with his arm. Minato formed a Rasengan, then spun around and shoved it in Arashi's shoulder. Arashi was sent flying back with his sleeve sped off and his arm having burnt marks all over it. Minato flash stepped in front of Arashi as the Hokage's Ryatsu began to rise and he slashed the Arrancar across the chest. A little cut was made and some blood trickled down the wound. Minato grinned, seeing that he can hurt him now. Minato attempted to kick Arashi, but the Arrancar grabbed his ankle and began to crush it. The Hokage raised his other leg and kicked the side of Arashi's head, making him fly back a bit. Arashi growled as he unsheathed his sword and appeared in front of Minato as the two clashed blades once again, high up in the sky at the moment. Seems like he is getting angry. I can use this as my advantage, Minato said to himself as he twisted his blade a bit to make Arashi go forward just a bit. Enough for Minato to punch him with Ryatsu spiraling around the Hokage's fist, making Arashi slam into a section of the Konoha wall, crumbling it. Minato looked down as he saw a red light come from the area Arashi crashed into and then quickly slammed into Minato. Minato's cloak got sped partway and blood came out of his sternum section. Minato fell to the ground, making an indentation of his silhouette as he fell. He slowly got up, stabbing his sword into the ground to help him up as Arashi walked over to him. Did you like that, Minato? It's called Bala, Arashi said as his fist glowed red and he punched the air, sending a small red energy orb darting towards Minato. Minato flash stepped away from it. When the blast hit the ground, it made a large indentation. Minato appeared beside Arashi, but his knees were up to his chest, so he was technically in the air. His blade glowed with golden aura as he slashed at Arashi, who simply clashed blades with him. Minato's sword sent Arashi back a bit until Minato finally overpowered him and sent Arashi spiraling into the air in the middle of Konoha. Minato flash stepped in front of Arashi and they began to slash at each other. Only a few cuts were received at the moment. Orochimaru walked down the hallway to the hospital and looked around at the doors looking for Kushina's. He sighed a bit, then closed his eyes and walked in Kushina's room, having a blank face but with a hint of regret. Kushina was a bit too tired and stressed to tell, and she looked up at him and smiled. Hey Orochimaru, wanna see our child? Jiraiya gave me a great name for him, Kushina said, holding her child up so Orochimaru could see. I see, so what's his name? Orochimaru asked. Naruto Uzumaki. It's the main character in Jiraiya's book and he is a good friend of Minato's, basically his father figure. Minato wanted to name him that for some time, Kushina said. Orochimaru unsheathed his sword, then looked over at Kushina. The Quincy looked over at the Shinigami and saw that he wasn't acting the same way he used to when the three hung out together earlier when they were in Konoha. It seemed like he was tainted by some power and couldn't seem to control it. You always seem to be in Minato's shadow, Orochimaru, Aizen said, sitting beside Orochimaru in the Soul Society 7 months before he went to Konoha. Yeah, but I don't mind, he is the better Shinigami out of the two of us, Orochimaru said and sighed a bit. I can help you get stronger, I can help you surpass Minato, and all you have to do is to swear loyalty under me, Aizen said as he pulled out a gem-like item called the Hogyoku. Orochimaru raised his sword and quickly slashed at Kushina's head, having it well fall off and blood splatter on the windows. Orochimaru's hand shook as he saw the child lying beside his deceased mother. He shook his head, then flash stepped to the outskirts of Konoha and began to run. Minato and Arashi clashed blades again with their Ryatsu skyrocketing as the pressure affected some pedestrians on the ground. The two drifted back and began to slash at each other. Each time they slashed, their blades touched and an immense wave of Ryatsu shot into the sky. The two drifted back once again. Arashi growled and gripped his hilt tight enough for his hand to bleed. Why, With all the power I had gained, why am I still equal to you? Why? Arashi shouted. Then his Ryatsu began to skyrocket in an insane amount to make Minato freeze in amazement. Shouta Kota Kitsune. Arashi said as his cloak flew off with the intensity of his Ryatsu. The white substance covered his head but left his face barely untouched. Think of Spider-Man 3 Venom when he retracts his mask every time he talks. The white substance covered his body as spikes came from his back and 9 tails sprouted from him, which had red chakra-like aura swarming each tail. I guess this would be a good time to, Minato said to himself, but before he finished he was slashed in the gut and elbowed back into a tree a few miles from where they were. Arashi appeared in front of Minato in an instant and they clashed blades. Arashi then swung one of the tails out at Minato, which burned his left face cheek and made him go flying deeper into the forest, slamming into another tree hard enough for the lower part to loose all its bark. Minato was then punched hard in the gut, making the tree go in half. Arashi grabbed Minato and threw him up in the air, then placed his open palm in the direction he was flying at. A red orb appeared in front of Arashi's palm as he blasted the red orb, which was known to the hollows as a Sero. Minato was in mid-air and just stopped spiraling out of control as he sheathed his sword and looked at the Sero coming straight towards him. He formed 2 Razingans in each hand, a bit bigger than the normal-sized ones. He panted as he was beaten up pretty badly. Blood came down from his forehead, which was covered by the Leaf Village forehead protector, which was also a bit blood-stained. There's no way I can dodge this. I'm gonna have to try my best to reduce as much damage as I can, Minato said to himself. As the Sero came close, Minato raised his hands. Once the Sero got closer, Minato shoved his hands into the Sero, making the red energy spiral around trying to hit Minato. The Hokage's cloak sped off and the sleeves were still attached to his shoulders. The Junin jacket unzipped itself and blew in the wind. The Razingans started to overpower it oddly as Minato fed more chakra into it and pushing his Ryatsu to its limit. Minato's headband flew off of his head and he slowly moved closer, putting more power into his Razingans. Arashi felt Minato's resistance against the Sero and he growled and put more power into it. He felt a bit lightheaded as he made the Sero pretty strong, thinking it would finish him off. The ground below Arashi's feet began to crumble as he moved forward, intensifying the Sero. Arashi saw the outbursts of the Sero and Rasengan crashing into the ground, making violent winds and heavy indentions into the ground. Arashi yelled and put more power into it as he felt Minato's resistance to the Sero become weaker. Minato saw his Rasengans weaken and his hands began to feel the burn of the Sero. I don't have a choice, I got to move out of the way, he just intensified it, and if I get hit by that I'll s. Minato said to himself. Then he used the rest of the Rasengan's power to thrust him to the left as he then became out of reach to the Sero and watched as the blast shot into the sky. Minato unsheathed his sword and quickly spun around, then pointed his sword out at Arashi. Shine through the darkness, Harashin. His aura began to burst out of his body as he landed on the ground. His sword turned a bright yellow and became a double-sided sword with electricity swarming around it. Clouds covered the sky and thunder began to be heard in violent booms. You've reached Shikai, I see, Arashi said, growling silently as he looked at Minato. We're both at our limits, don't waste my time with talking, come. Minato said as he got into a horse stance as his double-bladed Zanpakuto was held behind him. Think of Darth Maul's lightsaber. The two charged at each other and clashed blades. Minato spun his sword around and slashed Arashi across the face. He then dashed forward and head-butted Arashi so that he would stagger a bit. Minato then spun his sword around with electricity surging through his blade as he rapidly cut Arashi in the chest like a saw. Arashi eventually grabbed one of the blades as it skinned his chest, which was now covered in blood. He espered Minato in the foot, then as a red aura swarmed around his fist he punched Minato, making him fly back. Minato used his other leg to kick the guard of Arashi's sword so it didn't stick to his foot anymore. Arashi rapidly punched the air as the red Sero-like attacks hit him and made him bounce in random directions like a pinball. Minato planted his feet firmly on the ground and sent 2 golden waves of Ryatsu out at Arashi, making the rest of those red Sero-like attacks nullify from the intensity of the Ryatsu wave. Arashi managed to block one, but another one striked him straight through his shoulder, making his right arm almost fall off. Arashi stepped back, then swinged his tails to make waves of intense wind slam into Minato. Minato was so weak at the time he couldn't dodge, so he just got it, which made his Junin jacket fly out and half of his shirt getting sped. Arashi appeared behind Minato and attempted to S him with his sword repeatedly, but Minato spun around and upwardly slashed Arashi, then spun his sword around and slashed down at his right arm. Blood spewed everywhere as Arashi's Shikai wore off and he stepped back wide-eyed. Blood trickled down from Arashi's mouth as he stepped back and fell down. He then started to slightly laugh. You may have defeated me, but that doesn't mean you can stop the nine-tailed fox from crushing your village, Arashi said and coughed as he closed his eyes and laid limp. Minato panted and sheathed his sword as his Shikai wore off as well. I have to seal that fox back in the sword. I don't have enough energy, so I'll have to resort to life force, which means I'll without even getting a chance to see my son, Naruto, Uzumaki. I have to see him, just once. Minato said to himself as he ordered a Junin to bring him his son as the Hokage looked up at the fox and the many villages sing from the fox's anger. The Junin brought the baby Naruto over to Minato as the father and child looked at each other. Minato also learned that his wife had been killed mysteriously and that Orochimaru had gone missing. He formed his sadness into anger at Arashi and pounded his fist on the ground. He had wished the boy would have a mother and father to come home to when he is older. He also hoped that Naruto would never learn about his past and never return to the Soul Society so this madness could be avoided. Minato stood up and picked up Arashi's sword. Naruto began to cry and Minato told him to get him out of here as the Junin began to run back to the gates. Minato pointed Arashi's sword at the fox and it started to glow red as the fox was immediately sucked into the sword, using up energy to force such a mass into a blade like that. Red gas filled the air after the fox left and most if not all of the chakra gas went inside Naruto, which meant part of the Zanpakuto spirit laid within Naruto's conscious. Minato knelt down and laid on the ground and closed his eyes as he gazed at Konoha one final time. A few hours after the chaos has settled, Aizen appeared behind Arashi and helped him up. His arm was reconnected to his body and it took a while for it to move right again. Arashi saw where Minato's body laid and saw that he had successfully sealed most of the Kyuubi back in its home. That Minato was something else. Too bad he SD. It seemed like the chakra that was left behind got sealed into his son from what I saw. Aizen said. Wait, you were watching? Arashi asked, turning around. Why, of course, just in case Minato ended up King Yu, I had to stop him somehow. Our other Arrancar seemed to do his job well by beheading his wife, but it seemed like he ran away. It would be a bother to catch him now, but nonetheless I have a new assignment for you, Arashi. What is it then? I want you to remain in the human world and form an organization. I have the list of people here. I have talked to them and they have joined our cause and they each tapped into some of the power of an Arrancar, and some are strong enough that they don't even need the Hogyoku. Aizen said. What should it be called? Arashi asked. Akatsuki, and the cloak you were wearing, that could be the uniform of this organization. Aizen suggested. Sounds great. Once I recuperate I'll get right to it. Arashi said and bowed as Aizen stepped through a portal and went back to the Soul Society. So it was decided. After a few months of recuperating, Arashi had designed the uniform for the Akatsuki. He wore an orange mask that had somewhat of a spiral around it and one eye hole. He wore the mask because he didn't want anyone to see what the Arrancar transformation did to his face. The white substance across the right side of his face and whatnot. He had first asked a man named Nagato and told him to fake the leader so everyone would relieve suspicion of him being one. A girl named Konan had also joined, and in 5 months Arashi had finally established Akatsuki that would wait until Aizen had shown the Soul Society of what he really was, then serve under him. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.